Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome out to tonight's training webinar. We're going to go ahead and try to get this launched and started here, and we want to make sure that that everybody can hear us properly here. So we're going to go ahead and just launch this here. Let's make sure it's working properly, and that we're not having any kinds of audio problems here. Let's see. There we go. Good. So you should be able to see the tax sale support screen up there in front of you right now, and you should be able to hear us. I'm Shade Foray, here with Steven Swenson. This is the weekly coaches call for all of the coaching students that we have, and yeah, we appreciate you joining us. We like to cover different topics, on these coaches calls, and we've actually been doing a series here called the Coaching Core Concepts. We've been going over information that we want new coaching students to know and understand before they get started.
Yeah, exactly. We have, students that come into us on all different levels of coaching, and that's part of the reason that we put together these weekly trainings is because, there may be spaces between coaching sessions, and we want to get a chance each week to connect with you, but also to talk about items like Shade mentioned that are going to be important for our coaching students, important things you need to learn and understand before really even starting coaching or investing in coaching. Buying property is really kind of understanding those basics.
Yeah, well, a lot of it, I think, comes down to how we look at coaching, and part of the reason why we think other coaching programs out there, so many of them fail. And part of that is that we think they spend too much time focused on everything else but what's really important. And it's an easy thing to do. I think it happens to us as investors. We're trying to figure out how to be effective and not waste our time on things that aren't going to help us be successful. And that's really what this is about, is trying to narrow down coaching topics to what's vital for success.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And really during these coaching sessions, if we're not doing one of these four things, either finding, researching, buying, or selling property, then really we're doing both, not only you, but ourselves a disservice, because that's really going to be the time, that's set aside for doing these things and actually making money. That's how we're able to have success with our students, is because we're not focused on theory during 4 or 5, 6 training sessions, just trying to get through theory or training. We want to get directly to the money-making part of the business.
Yeah, really what that kind of comes down to is that our objective for every coaching student we have is to help them make money investing. And the only way we can do that is if they're buying and selling property. And so we try to focus on that completely. And that's what these core sessions are all about, is making sure that coaching students are prepared when they get started, and that they understand the steps that are involved in what we're going to be focusing on. Because as long as they understand some of these fundamental concepts, they can move forward with their training. A lot of what they're going to learn will happen as they go through the process of doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So the actual steps that we have, they break down, and we limit it down to about 4 different major steps here. But what we're ultimately going to be talking about this week, it's part 2 of selling here. We're talking about kind of the buying and selling. They are the last parts here of the process before we reinvest. And so we're going to pick up sort of where we left off here last week. And we're going to be talking about exit strategies here for a moment, because they play an important role when it comes to tax sale investing. But there is important knowledge and information you need to understand about tax deeds and how they work, in order to properly understand what your exit strategy options are.
Yeah, and every exit strategy is going to be different depending on what your personal goals are, the type of property. When we're talking about exit strategy, there may be the exit strategy of wholesaling or going through quiet title to get top dollar for a property. So, depending on what type of exit strategy you decide, there's going to be different things that you're going to need to do to really use that strategy.
Yeah, in fact, and different strategies are going to work out best with different properties. But the first thing let's do is let's break it down according to estimated duration, okay, or the duration of the investment. So what we're talking about here is the time it takes to sell the property once it's been transferred into your name. Once you actually receive a deed to the property, the duration here is how long it takes to monetize the investment. And so we break this down into roughly 3 different time frames. We've got a short time frame, which is generally going to be 0 to 3 months. It's anything you can do in the first 3 months or so. And again, these are not hard lines. This is just to give you a general idea. Midterm might be something like 3 to 12 months. And there's a difference between these two that is more than just the time it takes to sell. We're going to get more into exactly what distinguishes between these 2 time frames. The third one, though, is long term, and that's what we would consider anything that might be 12 months or longer. And that may also be a strategy. A holding strategy works in many cases. Many people don't want to really sell the property, but they still want to monetize it. And you can do that. You can monetize the property and actually still maintain ownership of it, which would fall under kind of a long-term strategy. But that's how we break them down, is into those 3. What's important as an investor is to figure out which one of those time frames you want to fit in with your exit strategy, and also make sure that it fits the property that you're selling.
Yeah, and when we're looking at these different time frames, with a short-term value deal, essentially we're looking to wholesale the property. So, we are getting the property deed, and essentially we're listing it usually for a pretty good discount to the general public, really trying to get it sold quickly. So, maybe it takes 4 or 5 months before we actually sell it. Maybe we sell it in 2 months, but it's kind of that short-term strategy where we essentially want to get the property sold as quickly as possible so that we can get that profit and then reinvest it.
Yeah. In fact, the biggest difference between these time frames is the method that you're using to sell the properties. In the short term, that's going to be selling the property using wholesale value. If we're talking about midterm, what we're actually allowing there time-wise is this is a method that's based on selling it for full market value, which would be having a warranty deed on it, which we're going to talk about kind of how this works. But the midterm here is basically given the time period it would take to take the property through quiet title in order to get a warranty deed. We're going to focus on some of these terms and what they mean today, and what we want people to understand. When it comes to the long term, ultimately you could sell properties either way. Although the longer you have the property, the more it's going to make sense to sell it for market value, because you should be able to get a warranty deed on it.
Yeah, really. I mean, for short-term investments, you're looking to sell it quickly. For more of that midterm investment, you're essentially looking to have that 6 months to 12 months to go through quiet title. Maybe you're doing rehab on the property. That's kind of your traditional flip, where you're buying a property, fixing it up, kind of your flip and flip, your fix and flip, where you're doing some of those things, getting the title ready, and then essentially you're listing on the sale, listing it for sale for full market value, versus selling it on the wholesale market, where you're selling it to another investor or a new property owner, where you're selling it as a discount. That midterm level is going to increase the value, but you're also going to spend more time and more money using that strategy.
Yeah. In fact, we are going to be talking a lot about different value types, and it's important to understand exactly what we're talking about. The assessed value, whenever you read that, the assessed value doesn't really mean a lot to us, aside from when we use it with initial lists to try to get an idea of what properties are. But we don't use the assessed value as a hard line for what the property's worth. The 2 primary values that we're dealing with when it comes to estimating property value is selling it. The 2 primary values we're going to be dealing with are market value and wholesale value. And the difference between those 2 is really going to come down to the type of deed that you have. A market value is the value of the property as it's sold to anybody that's getting financing, to your average buyer. For most, for the majority of your real estate transactions are done with market value, and market value is what we would sell a property for if we had gone through the process to get a warranty deed on it. We would basically be selling that for as much as we could, and we could sell it through a realtor if we wanted, through market value at that point.
Yeah, market value is that price that similar properties that to the one that you're listing or that you're trying to sell essentially are selling or for sale at a similar type price point. So in some areas like Florida, for example, you could look at a property that has a $50,000 assessed value, But in looking at the market value and looking at comparables, we determined that the market value, or maybe even the Zillow value, is closer to 90 or 100,000.
Yeah.
So essentially, we're going to be looking at assessed value based off the assessed, but the market value is going to be closer to 70 or 80,000 or 100,000, and that's how we're going to determine really that wholesale value if we're looking to sell it as a discount.
Yeah, the market value represents the full price, or the highest possible price that the property will most likely sell for, and that kind of leads us into wholesale, which is something a lot of people don't understand or really know very much about wholesale value when it comes to real estate. And that's because the vast majority of real estate is sold at market value. There's not a lot of it that's actually sold for wholesale. What that means for us is it's a massive market that if people know they can buy property at discounted prices, they're interested, because there's just not that many ways to do it. For our concerns here, selling it for wholesale value, what we're looking at there is the price that we can sell the property at with a quitclaim deed and without any kind of financing. That's ultimately what that price is. It's the price that somebody is willing to pay us for that property outright, and to be transferred with a quitclaim deed. So they're going to receive a quitclaim deed when they purchase it with this method.
Yeah, and that wholesale value, that could be as little as 30% of the market value or up to 60 or 70% of the market value. It's really kind of, what a buyer is willing to pay for your property.
Yeah. In fact, we use the number sometimes 50%, but ultimately that's not a set number. It's not like something that you're going to find everywhere. We just use that to give us a rough idea of what it will often sell for. But basically what we're looking at here when we're talking about wholesale, what is wholesale value? It is the price that you're going to sell the property at using the tax deed, or the equivalent of a quitclaim deed, basically. These are transactions that are done for a cash price that don't involve lenders or financing, and we're going to talk about specifically why that is. But what's important to know about this is that the deed that the person will be receiving is a quitclaim deed. That's how we're going to transfer ownership to them. They're still going to have full ownership rights to the property. That's not something that is affected at all by these deed ties. So we want to wholesale the property, though, if we don't want to go through the process to get quiet title, or if it's not going to make financial sense to do so. And so in that case, what we're looking for is the person that's willing to pay us the most for the property as it sits, and that maybe they're individuals that would want to take the property through quiet title. For us, that just adds too much time to the equation. We want to be able to do these transactions in a shorter time period than that.
Yeah, and a lot of times these type of wholesale properties are cheaper type of properties. So maybe these are, something like a building lot, or, usually under $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 as far as kind of the market value. They're usually going to be generally cheaper type of properties where we are essentially wholesaling them to turn around and make a profit. So, we may only be selling these properties for $2,000 or $3,000, but we're essentially making a good return off what we paid for it.
Yeah. So you can sell for wholesale value and still earn excellent returns, on your money. And there are many advantages to buying real estate wholesale if you can find it. The biggest issue is that most people, don't know that it exists or that it's available. And so let's just talk for a second about who the potential buyers are, and how we might target or locate them. Because one of the things that we have to consider when we're looking at wholesaling the property is that we can't hire a realtor to wholesale the property for us. And in fact, wholesale generally is something that takes place outside of people like realtors and market value. It's something that we're going to have to put together, and that we'll need to do the legwork on.
Yeah, it's even something that's kind of separate from even like title companies and escrow companies,
Mm-hmm.
people that do the normal real estate transactions. If you were to go buy a home, you would get set up with a title company and escrow, and they would do all of the deed work and prepare
all the transfer information.
Exactly. But when we're doing it at wholesale, essentially this is stuff that we have to do on our own. So that's part of wholesale property. Also when we're talking about wholesale property, it isn't always going to be another investor that buys this property. It very well could be a local neighbor or somebody there local who essentially wants to buy the property for a discount.
Yeah. In fact, the reality is we can sell wholesale to anybody. Anybody can purchase wholesale. It doesn't have to be an investor. It doesn't have to be anybody with special qualifications. Nothing like that. Because really, wholesale is just to describe the way that we're selling it. It doesn't limit anybody on what they can buy. So when we're talking about who the most likely buyers are or who the best potential buyers are when we're looking at it, we're going to start there locally and assume that the most likely buyer is going to be somebody that lives in that area and that would have the ability to use the property. So most likely a local resident, or it could be even like a neighboring property owner.
Yeah, exactly. When we're approaching these potential buyers as a wholesaler or wholesaling these properties, essentially, we're giving it to them at such a huge discount off of market value. So you're not going to have your traditional person. They might not even realize they're looking for property. They
may not be interested
and say, oh my goodness, I can buy this lot here for $2,000. And I think it has an assessed value of 8 or 10. And not only that, I'd like to build a home a couple years down the future. So this gives me an opportunity to buy this property. And they can either wholesale it and pay you cash out front, but if they don't have that type of income up front, which sometimes happens with these type of deals where you're dealing with just regular people, well, that's where that seller financing tool comes in, where you can essentially wholesale it, but I'll still offer seller financing.
Yeah. In fact, I think it is. It's a really good point to just to remind people that the buyers could very well be people that have no intention in buying real estate, but that's because they've never had the opportunity to buy real estate at wholesale prices before, and they also most people think when they think about real estate, they think about everything that's going to be required of them in order to buy it, all the financing stuff, all of the dealing with lenders. And if they have a way to bypass all of that, not have to deal with any of that, they will jump on that opportunity, especially if you are flexible on financing options and you can make it easier for them to get into the property, which is why if we could sell it to anybody, we prefer to sell it, wholesale to a neighbor or to a local resident there who can utilize the property and still get a good deal on it as well, make money on it.
Yeah, and so for most of what we're going to do, we're going to be marketing it to the local investors, to the local property owners there. But the one thing about listing your property online is that you may have out-of-state investors that just see it as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because we've priced it so well, and that's something we're looking at as well when we're going in. Just to quickly mention, when we're looking at wholesaling a property, we're not only looking at what the property value is, but we're also looking to see what the competition is within that area. So, if we're looking and we see, a ton of homes listed at a very low price, then we know we're going to need to be more aggressive with our pricing to be able to get it sold quickly. If the prices are higher, then we essentially can raise that wholesale value up a little bit more.
Yeah, in fact, comps play an incredibly important role in helping us determine what the wholesale pricing is going to be on the property. Rather than just setting some kind of an arbitrary percentage and setting it at that, what we really want to do is get a feel for the market and what buyers are paying right now, or what they've paid in the past, what the best deals are that are out there, so that we can draw a buyer quickly. In other words, if we look and we can see that there are 10 properties starting at $5,000, we may want to consider offering a property for $3,000 or for $4,000 because we can offer something that will be far and away the best deal available in the area. We can attract or draw out a buyer faster.
Yeah, and then when we're looking at this too, if we get offers, a good offer, and we're still making an incredible profit, even if we're selling it for a discount, as long as we're making a good profit, it could very be well worth it to sell it even for maybe more of a discount than we initially thought. I guess kind of that adage is, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush or whatever.
Yeah.
Or something like that, where essentially, if you can, let's say you're trying to get 3,000 on the property and you get an offer for 2,000. If you only paid a couple $100 for it, it may be better just to take that $2,000 and essentially reinvest it versus holding on to the property for another 3 months, hoping to get that extra 1,000.
Yeah. In fact, if we can find, a lot of what's important to us is finding an interested buyer, somebody that's interested in the property and that wants it. If they want the property, then we can generally figure out some kind of financing terms that will make it possible for that person to get into the property, and that can allow us to still be very profitable with it. It's especially true on the properties that we don't pay very much for. When you've got properties that you are only paying $100 for or $200 for, you've got a lot of freedom to adjust that pricing, to find buyers. And so, let's talk for a minute and make sure everybody understands the difference here between tax deeds and warranty deeds, and how they play into the exit strategy that we're going to pursue. So tax deeds are what are issued to the to property. Tax deeds are basically what are issued when the county forecloses on properties due to delinquent taxes. Now, that tax deed is basically just it is a tool to convey property ownership, just like a quitclaim deed would. But specifically for the county, they create the tax deed because they foreclosed on the county. Because they foreclosed on the property due to delinquent taxes. It makes sense that it is a tax deed, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing as a quitclaim deed. It's basically just a way for the county to issue a deed that is going to limit their liability.
Yeah, and it will kind of depend on the state what type of deed you receive. You may receive an actual tax deed, where it's called a tax deed. You may receive a quitclaim deed. You may receive something like a limited warranty deed.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, all of those names are essentially the same thing, where the county is just giving you their interest in the property. So you essentially, they're giving all of their ownership to you, and you essentially own the property at that point.
Yeah. Now, in all of these cases, the county will issue out a tax deed or the equivalent of. What they won't give you is a warranty deed. Now, warranty deeds are the most common deed that you'll find with most real estate transactions that are done for retail or for market value. In other words, if real estate's selling for full price, it's doing so with a warranty deed on it. And part of what that is about is the warranty or guarantee that is issued by the county about that specific property. The warranty itself is that the county warranties or guarantees that there are no claims or encumbrances against the property, that they basically have checked it out and that it's clear.
Yeah, in fact, when you get title insurance, essentially that that title insurance is ensuring that the county and that warranty deed is correct. So when they're issuing title insurance, essentially they're issuing the insurance that the warranty deed and the title and everything has been done correctly by the county. And that kind of makes sense why the county wouldn't want to just automatically issue warranty deeds on properties that are essentially going through the tax sale foreclosure.
Yeah.
There could be other governmental liens attached to that property. There could be issues that may arise. And that's kind of part of the beast of investing with tax sale certificates.
Yeah, in fact, let's talk about title insurance for a second, because I think this is part of where people get hung up on it and trying to understand, how this all works. And basically, if you look at it from the perspective of a lender, it makes a little bit more sense. So title insurance is a form of indemnity insurance predominantly found in the United States, which insures against financial loss from defects in title to real property and from the invalidity or unenforceability of mortgage loans. The vast majority of title insurance policies are written on land within the United States. So basically what we're really talking about here is it is a form of insurance that is issued to prevent financial loss when acquiring or purchasing property. So in other words, what the concern that a lender has is is that if they go to borrow money for a particular property, their concern is that when when title is transferred over, that the property could have additional encumbrances, or there is money owed essentially on the property that the buyer isn't aware of, and the lender doesn't want to be put in that position to lose money on a property or to have some kind of financial obligation that they didn't agree to.
Yeah, or there could be some problem in the title and the property, they don't even own.
Yeah.
They're putting on a mortgage against a property owner that doesn't actually own the property. And so it is possible to get title insurance on tax sale properties, but it's not going to be something general. There is, like, we've seen certain companies that will issue title insurance, like in Washington before, where they've done the research on the property, and that's kind of where tax title services and clear to sell come into play as well, as they charge a fee to essentially guarantee and do all of that work for the title.
Yeah, they're basically title insurance companies that that in a way kind of specialize in tax deeds or other deeds that don't have the warranty deed with them.
Yeah. And so, with those type of scenarios, if you have a buyer that needs financing very quickly and wants to do the deal, or you're trying to refinance or something like that, that could be a good option.
Yeah, what they've basically done is they've made it about the same price to offer title insurance as it is roughly to pursue quiet title. And so it's a choice that people can make. Pay more for the title insurance to do it quickly, or pursue quiet title, and it's going to take a little more time.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we're talking about quiet title and warranty deeds and all of this, the reason why it's important to understand quiet title and how it works is because you may need to pursue quiet title on some properties, or other properties you may decide not to. But quiet title is the process that we go through to turn a tax deed into a warranty deed. It is basically the process to establish an individual's rights to the property, and again, this has nothing to do with your ownership rights. That's conveyed to you fully when you go to buy the property from the tax sale. Quiet title is a little bit different. It's more about quieting any potential claims to the property so that the county can give you that warranty deed again.
Yeah, essentially it's just the court process, the legal process of turning that tax deed into a warranty deed. And so it's going to be, you're going to usually be using an attorney in these type of situations. Unless you live within that area and are pretty familiar with law, it's going to make most sense to just hire an attorney to do it for you. But essentially, they're going to be sending out notices to the previous property owners and people that may have interest in the property, essentially letting them know that the quiet title action is going to take place. And I would say that probably in 99% or most cases, you aren't going to have an owner that essentially comes back and tries to claim the property.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the property was lost to foreclosure long before this ever happened. And, in other words, foreclosure notices went out to all the parties that had a financial interest in the property. And at the end of the day, nobody came forward to pay it off. The property was foreclosed on. And so the quiet title process here isn't so much about giving them a chance, like a second chance to get their property back again. What it is really is it's the county making sure they didn't make a mistake, because there's always that possibility or chance that maybe the county could have made some kind of mistake. Maybe the claims against the property are legitimate, and the only way you would really know that is by taking it through the court proceeding.
Yeah. In fact, we really haven't had a lot of experience with any of the counties ever making a mistake. But we've kind of come up with a problem this week that maybe somebody actually did pay their property taxes that said they didn't, and we're doing some more research on that. But that's pretty rare. I mean, in our 20 years, this is the first time we've ever had that happen.
Yeah. Essentially, we were contacted by an attorney that was speaking on behalf of a lady that thought that she owned a property, but that we bought through tax sale, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is she might have actually been paying property taxes on it. You know, we bought this property in Mississippi, and Mississippi is a little more backwards, or just, you know, it's not quite as up to date as somebody like Florida, and so you can see that a mistake would be more likely to happen in more of a rural type county than, you know, maybe in a more up to date one.
Yeah, well, so we're going to go back and check, but the whole point is that when you go to pursue quiet title, it's really in a way like the foreclosure process through the courts again. Although instead of getting foreclosure notices, they're getting a quiet title notice, and you know, they have the opportunity to appear before the court if they want to, or if they claim that there was some kind of mistake made. But otherwise, what it's really about, though, is about putting that out there publicly, and you know, giving anybody that does have a claim the chance to come forward. The county has to do that before they can issue a warranty deed on the property. They have to be able to say that they've presented the property before the public and that there were no claims.
Yeah, and when it comes to quiet title, it can cost anywhere from maybe $1,000 up to a couple of grand. So, you know, when you're looking at doing quiet title on a property, you're going to take into account the value of the property, and does it make sense to put in this additional money and time to get a higher price, or can I sell it for wholesale and still make the same amount of money?
Yeah, a lot of times part of it's going to come down to how much you're paying for the property. You know, on most of your investments, where if you're buying the property for less than $500, it is probably not going to make a lot of financial sense to pursue quiet title on it, unless it was somehow going to give you the ability to sell the property for $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000. You know, it would have to be a pretty high amount in order to justify.
Let's say you bought, you know, a $500 lot that you're trying to sell for $6,000, you know, or let's say that, you know, it even has a market of $6,000 and you're trying to get $3,000 for it. It doesn't make sense to put in, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 to try to, you know, get $6,000 if you're trying to wholesale it at $3,000.
Yeah.
You know, why spend an extra 3-6 months and the time that's involved to make an extra $1,000, or maybe not even that? Maybe it'll probably come out even on a number like that. So it makes more sense in properties that are over $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, where, you know, putting in $1,000 or $2,000 and some time may make you an extra $10,000 or $20,000 versus, you know, coming out close to even.
Yeah. In fact, there are a lot of properties, you know, that we might target and look at where we just wouldn't pursue quiet title because it doesn't make a lot of financial sense. If we're only into the property for a few $100s, you know, for everything, then we're probably not going to sink that kind of capital, a couple $1,000s, you know, $1,500 into the property to get that, because we can use that money better in other places, you know, to buy more property. Also, you know, wholesaling a property is quite a bit easier, you know, in some ways than taking. Of course, I guess it's easier and it's harder at the same time. It's easier in that you know, it's easier to find buyers, I think, and to get a deal done. But it's harder in that you don't have somebody like a real estate agent that's going to handle all the paperwork for you. So you're going to have to go through and be the one to transfer title. But in terms of selling it, though, I think it's definitely easier selling properties for wholesale than it is at market.
Yeah, the one thing that is nice about selling it for market value, or at least going through and getting the warranty deed, is the ability to take it into any title company and get title insurance, or you know, to do the paperwork or the escrow or anything like that is going to be a lot easier. And so, you know, on the properties that are higher value properties, we really recommend, you know, looking very seriously at quiet title on any property worth over $20,000.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the value goes up, it's going to make more and more financial sense to pursue it. You know, really, you know, here, you know, it's really all about trying to remove any of those clouds to the title. You know, sometimes you'll see title, you'll see deeds referred to as clouded deeds or clouded titles. You know, and that's what they mean by that. Not necessarily that there's something wrong with the property, but if it's non-insurable, they're going to call it a clouded title.
Yeah, and this is usually going to be done within the circuit court where that property is located. So, if you live in California and you bought a Florida property, you're not going to be doing the quiet title through your Florida court. You're going to be taking it to the circuit court where the property is located.
Yeah, in fact, that's another good point here to remember about quiet title laws. These are state laws, okay? In other words, every state has their own laws that control things like property tax collection, and that includes also, laws that govern and control things like the quiet title process and how that works. So it's going to be very state specific, in terms of how it operates and works. But beyond that, when you're having somebody, if you're going to hire an attorney to pursue quiet title, what they'll be doing is going before the court. And so you need that real estate attorney to be local, because they need to be familiar with local laws, and they also need to have the ability to attend the court.
Yeah, exactly. Some states will have actual statutes that are written into the state law. Other states will allow, the courts to essentially fashion those laws. But every state's going to be a little bit different, like Shade said, even though we're kind of going through the same process of essentially, notifying past owners, going through a court proceeding. It's really almost kind of like a lawsuit to a degree. It's, a full court lawsuit or proceeding where you're essentially quieting that title. So as far as the time frame, it's going to kind of depend, and the cost is kind of depend on that state. We generally say between 3 to 6 months, or $1,000 to $3,000. We've heard places like in California where it's more expensive, and there's a huge amount of title work done where quiet title was up to $4,000 or $5,000 for maybe a pretty expensive property that had a lot of work that needs to be done, where we found other places where you can do it for quite a bit cheaper.
Yeah. In fact, when we're talking about the process here that we go through with quiet title, and the cost that's involved, the cost can vary, because legal services and the cost can vary from state to state, but it's also dependent upon the property and how much work has to go into that specific property, because the past owners are going to need to be notified by certified mail. So whether that's one party or 25 parties will make a big difference in the amount of work that is required by the attorney to do it. And so that's part of the reason why the cost can fluctuate dramatically, is because some properties may have a lot more work than others.
Yeah, and as you're looking into the property records, you can look through the sales history, and that doesn't mean that if one has a very complicated sales history that we're not going to buy it. But we should, if we're looking at one and we see that they had one owner that got a warranty deed that was 20 years ago or 15 years ago, there's not a ton of sales information. That'll probably be, generally speaking, an easier quiet title process to go through. Versus one where maybe the property has changed hands from investors to different investors, quick claim deeds, warrant, back and forth, and maybe 5 or 10 times over the last decade. Well, that one's going to take some more work from an attorney standpoint to do the quiet title, because he's going to have to notify those people. And so once they notify him, essentially those the defendants or the people that are being notified will essentially have 20 days to respond to the notice.
Yeah, which is very similar to the way that the judicial foreclosure works as well. Judicial foreclosure notices are sent out by certified mail, and the recipients have a set time period there to respond. And if nobody responds, then they foreclose on the property and basically issue a tax deed for it. So it is very similar here in process, because there is that set time period that people are given. It's going to take some time to get it done. In some cases, we've seen it done as quickly as 4 to 6 weeks, but on average, it's going to take more than that. On average, it's going to take at least a couple months usually.
And once the process. The court process of actually doing it, a lot of times it's going to be called a motion final judgment, or kind of that final process the court gives you. The judge will give you a motion final judgment. At least that's what many of the states call it, where he actually issues you the warranty deed.
Yeah. And the advantage of getting that is once you get that, it totally opens up the doors for how you can sell the property. You no longer need to look at wholesaling the property. You can sell it through a realtor, or basically you sell it for full market price. But yeah, like we were saying on the cost of it here, generally we're going to save between a $1,000 to $3,000 range, and you can a lot of times get more accurate estimates if you contact the attorney with some of the property information there in front of you. And they can probably give you a little bit better idea, but it's going to be a good idea to pursue a real estate attorney that specializes in quiet title, because real estate, I mean, attorneys tend to specialize in all sorts of things. We want one that specifically does quiet title and to a degree specializes in it.
Yeah, at least involved in real estate law and familiar with the process and has done the process. And really, it's going to be worth it to get a couple of different quotes. Talk to a couple of different people so that you can find the best price and also someone that seems like it's going to be the best situation.
Yeah, in fact, anytime we go to look for a real estate attorney for quiet title services, we always start searching there locally in the city that the property is located in, or the closest city to the one to where it's located in, and we generally begin looking for attorneys that are located there. Sometimes they even have advertisements and things that talk about quiet title.
Yeah.
If we can find something like that, yeah, it's great. We'll pursue that. If not, then we can just look for real estate attorneys in the area. But a lot of times, if you just type in quiet title, services in an area, there will be advertising there from local real estate law firm offices.
Yeah, you'll definitely find somewhere where they talk about something like that, and a lot of them will have it listed on their web pages. As I've been looking for different quiet title lawyers in certain areas. In fact, just this last week, I was looking in Florida for my uncle. He helped him buy a property there a few years back, and essentially needed to go through quiet title, or was looking at it going through a quiet title. So essentially looked within that area and was able to find somewhere they have an article, or they have it somewhere written that they handle the tax deed or quiet title processes.
Yeah. Like we said, though, going through quiet title is not your only option. You also have the option, if you're considering taking the property through a quiet title action, you should also probably think about or consider using one of these services like Tax Title Services, or one of these title insurance companies that will offer title insurance on tax deeds, because the cost could be close to the same, but the time period required for the tax title services could be done in, let's say, less than 30 days. Whereas, with the law firm, it might take closer to 90 days.
Yeah. And really kind of the difference being is with the law firm, and it could take even longer than 90 days, depending, because essentially it's not only just the law firm that's handling, it's the court schedule. When they can book it, how long does the court take? And so, the attorney could be right on it, but just because of how long it takes to schedule things within the court, it could take several months. But the tax title services, in fact, really, we probably should call up one of those companies and kind of talk with them about some of the ways that you can use their services more effectively. But it's really, if you have that buyer that comes to you and is ready to buy and wants to get financing, you couldn't get traditional financing. So being able to take them to Tax Title Services and have that done can get them financed pretty quickly. And there's a lot of different ways that you can essentially use those services, but that would really be to kind of get that quick deal done that you're needed to. Otherwise than just taking it through the quiet title process so you get a full warranty deed will probably make more sense.
Now, actually, I think I skipped here a few. No, that's actually the end here. Now let's kind of wrap it up here today in talking about the last part of the process here, which is the transferring of the title. And this is basically, it's what's going to happen after you've done a lot of the hard work, I think, of finding a buyer and trying to get terms agreed to. But once you can do that, and you can reach terms, the next step is basically you need to transfer title. You need to go through the steps that normally somebody like a real estate agent or others would handle in terms of some of the transfer information. We're going to do all of that ourselves, and so there are a couple of things that we need to be aware of when we do it. If you've never transferred title before on property, we've got some different steps here that are involved in the process to give you an idea. But essentially, what we're going to be doing is we need to once we have the buyer's information, we basically have to have the proper form, the proper quitclaim deed form, filled out and notarized, and then from there, it generally has to be sent in to the proper office with the within the county. And it has to include all of the information that is required in order for them to transfer title, which is oftentimes going to include, that quitclaim deed form. It's also going to include probably taxes in some form or another, or transfer taxes for real estate that will need to be paid. There are some different steps here. Let me find that one file we've got here on transfers. I don't remember if it's under transfers. Is it under transfers? Maybe I can just type in there. Which was that?
Arkansas something?
Yeah, it's under Arkansas. There we go. Tax deed transfer file. Okay. Now, this is just an example here with one state. Every state is going to have some unique methods or ways, procedure for transferring title. They're going to have different requirements here. But to give you an idea, here is a quitclaim deed form for that will work in Arkansas. And here we go. This is just using the preview method here. We can kind of see the way that it looks. You can see that what we've got here is information that we're going to be filling out here. Including the county that it is, the amount that's paid for, the location of the property, including things like the legal description. Right here it says insert legal description here. But the idea is that we want to get all that information recorded correctly and using the proper quitclaim deed form. And then, once we've got it filled out with both our information here, we can get it notarized. In some ways, it's kind of like transferring a car title in a way. A little bit if you buy a car from somebody. When you go to approach the state will can transfer the information over your name, but they're the ones that actually have to do the deed transfer over into your name. And they do the same thing here that the county does with these properties. If you're the owner of it, you send in this form filled out along with the new owner's information and the taxes that need to be paid, and then the county will handle the actual transfer itself. And once they do that, they will send out the new owner the deed to the property. They'll receive a deed to the property in the mail the same way you received a deed to the property in the mail following the tax sale.
Yeah, and every state's going to be a little bit different on what they require. All of the forms are going to be pretty similar. Of course, each state is going to be state specific, but they're going to have similar rules about the size of the font, the type, the type, and really what's going to be required within it. It's usually a 1 or 2 page document.
Yeah, like for instance, they have certain document requirements, so they may not necessarily have a quitclaim deed form that is state sponsored, but what they will say in here is what's allowed and what's not allowed, or things that need to be there or not be there. And so it's worth checking those things out, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to find forms that will work for specific states online.
And in fact, was working with Michael, and we're putting together a list and a kind of a database of all of our different forms from seller contract, seller financing type docs, and some of the different docs that we have, so we can at least create kind of a database or some tools that we can use, that have some of these different forms.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, here is a law office that specializes in quiet title action, and they are, again, specific to different areas. So if we're investing in Little Rock area, or we'll check the areas here, but this is a good way to find some of these lawyers just by doing online searches. I think they're beginning to advertise now to do that. There's also, in Arkansas specifically, they use what are called real estate transfer stamps, and basically it's the way for the state to collect a fee or a tax when property is transferred from one owner to another. Most states will have some kind of a transfer tax in place there. It's just a matter of figuring out how to go through the process of executing it. So, in this case, with Arkansas, you go through a process there to purchase stamps from this taxpayer access point here, and once you've got those stamps paid for, you're going to include that receipt in the paperwork that you're going to send to the county. So basically that's going to include, the quitclaim deed form all filled out, notarized, along with, your transfer tax, your transfer stamps, that you've got paid for, in
fact, some states, you'll have to actually provide a stamped envelope for them to send the deed.
Oh yeah,
property.
Yeah. Well. In fact, yeah,
they in Arkansas,
they don't want to send out the letter. What you basically have to do is include it with all the stuff you send in there. You also have an envelope that's already stamped and addressed to the party that will be receiving it. And again, not every county's like that. Some counties may send it out to the other parties, but it's a good idea to talk to them to find out, because they may state that in their instructions for doing it.
And in fact, maybe here in a few weeks, it might be good for us to do a training exactly on how to go through this whole process. Maybe include Michael on it, since he's doing a bunch of deals there.
Yeah.
Kind of go through these steps.
Yeah. The good news is that I think once you go through the process the first time, it's a lot easier. The second time around, and But again, if you go to do it in another state, it's kind of like doing it for the first time again, and you have to learn everything through. But once you've transferred the real estate, at that point, then you have to immediately begin looking to reinvest, because it's really easy to deplete all of your inventory, selling off all the properties that you've got. These are going to sell faster and easier than a lot of you might imagine. When you're wholesaling properties, you're able to offer good prices. It's not that hard to find buyers. Because it's just not something that's offered in very many places. So I think a lot of it is about just getting through this part of the process. If you can get through this part of the process, then really this is probably the hardest part of the process, I would say. At least in some ways. It's different part of the process here, from finding buyers and some of the specifics here. But once you get through this part, we think it's important to reinvest. We'll pretty much wrap it up here, since we've got the weekly webinar starting here in just a minute. So we'll plan on seeing everybody here in just a few minutes for that.
Yep, talk to you soon.